Good evening from Washington, D.C., and thank you for joining us for news from a Catholic perspective. I'm Wyatt Goolsby, in for Lauren Ashburn. Our top story tonight, the memo is out. Republicans on Capitol Hill released what they say is proof of misconduct by the FBI and DOJ. This comes after the White House declassified the bitterly disputed document tied to the Russia investigation. Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi begins our team coverage. Good evening, Jason.
Good evening, Wyatt. After weeks of anticipation and spin, you now have the chance to read these 4 pages yourself. The GOP memo claims the FBI abused its power by spying on a Trump associate during its investigation of the 2016 presidential campaign. Democrats call this misleading, but Republicans say it's jaw-dropping.
To my knowledge, this is the first time in American history that the FBI and Justice Department have been weaponized through the actions of a political party.
The Republican memo claims the FBI used a salacious and unverified dossier about Donald Trump to get a secret warrant to spy on volunteer Trump advisor Carter Page. It also says FBI and DOJ officials didn't tell the court that that dossier was paid for by the Democratic National Committee and the Hillary Clinton campaign. But Democrats say the GOP memo cherry picks intelligence.
I read the underlying documents, I read the memo, and I said last week that the memo was grossly misleading based on the underlying documents.
Democratic leader Nancy Pelosi says in declassifying the memo, President Trump has sent his friend Putin a bouquet. She also points to FBI warnings that the release would be extraordinarily reckless. Now, another interesting nugget that the memo says Christopher Steele, that's the author of that Trump dossier, told a senior DOJ official he was, and I'm quoting here, desperate that Donald Trump not get elected and was passionate about him not being president. According to the memo, officials say the warrant to surveil Carter Page, that Trump associate, would never have been granted without that dossier. Wyatt?
Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi reporting. Thanks, Jason. And we continue our team coverage tonight with reaction from the White House. Correspondent Mark Irons joins us now. Good evening, Mark.
Good evening, Wyatt. Earlier today, President Trump lashed out at top leadership in the FBI and Justice Department. He thinks this memo shows their political bias.
I think it's terrible. You want to know the truth? I think it's a disgrace. What's going on in this country, I think it's a disgrace. A lot of people should be ashamed of themselves, and much worse than that.
And late today, Press Secretary Sarah Sanders said the memo raises serious concerns about the integrity of decisions made at the highest levels of the Department of Justice and the FBI to use the government's most intrusive surveillance tools against American citizens. President Trump's decision to release the memo set up a clash with the man he picked to lead the FBI. Christopher Wray did not want the memo released. That's because the FBI claims the memo is inaccurate and lacks critical context. And today, President Trump was asked whether he has confidence in Rod Rosenstein, the Deputy Attorney General. He said, "You figure that one out." Wyatt.
White House correspondent Mark Irons reporting. Thanks, Mark. And joining us now for more analysis is Jason Russell, contributing editor with the Washington Examiner. Jason, welcome back. How do you think this memo will, on the Russian investigation will impact the FBI in terms of people's view on it?
Yeah, I think, well, it'll have a minor effect, I think, especially among Republicans, of further, sowing distrust among Republicans. But overall, I think this is just one, small piece of a larger investigation. There are still many other things that the FBI does. It's not just, political investigations into Hillary Clinton or the Trump campaign, even though that's what we hear about most of all. But, the FBI is still engaged in counterterrorism. They're still engaged in, other, day-to-day things that the FBI generally does. This only makes up a small amount of what the FBI does, and so that is important, obviously. Mm-hmm. There's a political effect from these investigations into the Trump campaign and the Clinton campaign, but, overall there are still many other things the FBI does.
Let's switch gears because I want to at least ask you about what the memo doesn't say, because we heard so much about what Jason Calvi and Mark Irons report about what it does say. What does it not say? What does it not reveal? Yeah,
I mean, it doesn't reveal any kind of, I think, deep state, conspiracy, flowing through the FBI. I think it shows at least, if you're being charitable, it shows, a mistake that was made by the FBI to seek a FISA warrant without showing that the Steele dossier was, politically motivated. That was either intentional or not intentional. We don't know for sure. If that was intentional, then yes, that was a mistake that deserves reprimand. If not, then there's still other punishment or action that has to be taken.
Let me dig a little bit deeper into that, because let's talk about the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, FISA there. What should Americans know about how it works and how officials are abusing their power to conduct surveillance?
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting issue that doesn't get a lot of attention. It's definitely interesting, especially because Congress just basically reauthorized FISA back in January without taking any major actions for reforming it. So, what you see is a lot of Republicans, saying, well, look how, the FBI is abusing its FISA powers, and Democrats saying, well, you had the opportunity to reform it. Now, it was a bipartisan bill, basically, to reauthorize FISA, but still very interesting that these issues are coming out, and they've been there for a while, but that when it was renewed in January, there wasn't any major action taken to reform this system.
So what do you think happens next now that this memo has been released?
I think next we'll probably see a Democratic version of the memo released in the next week or two, I would think. That'll have its own version of events. Definitely a different spin coming from that side, of course, and Republicans will give that document their own spin as well. So, like most political actions, this is going to be blown up by both sides, and you have to kind of find an interpretation in the middle to be most accurate.
And of course, we'll continue to follow it as well as you guys. Jason Russell, contributing editor with the Washington Examiner, thanks so much for your analysis.
Thank you.